Yeah, should I start?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to yet another session of Talking Films Online. Today we have with us Jayanto Dasgupta, who will be leading the discussion on. It's a first for our TFO. We'll be discussing a documentary, Himalaya, the Land of Women. Jayanto Dasgupta has taught English at the NDA, that is National Defence Academy, Kadakwasla, and earlier at other places like Aligarh and the Andamans. He quit full-time teaching in 2002. Since then, he has been trying to reinvent himself, which is still a work in progress. In the meantime, he has taught cinema and organizational communication in the Gulf and film theory, film appreciation programs in Pune and elsewhere. He still does it if asked politely, he said. His book on the Japanese occupation of the Andaman Islands during World War II was published by Manas Publications, Delhi in 2002. He has made documentary and short films and dabbled in theatre. Currently, he's working on two books, one on adaptation in cinema and the other a work of fiction. What he would really like to do is to make this blockbuster mainstream Hindi film and is actually working towards it. Thank you, Jayanto, and welcome. Please, you may
Thank you.
begin.
Um, Actually, I have chosen this film uh, somewhat apprehensively, in the sense, although I love the film, uh, I wasn't too sure that for people who want to seriously discuss cinema, if this would be, the appropriate film. But then I sort of went ahead with it because personally I just love the film. There's something about it which touches you deeply. And also I realized that probably it will give us an opportunity to sort of locate this film, in the context of cinema, film studies, documentaries, women's filmmaking, all these things, we would be able to talk about. As such, if we try and recollect um, this film, and there's really not much that one can say about it. One cannot have a very learned, intelligent discourse about the film. Just that it's a beautiful film, and it happens to be a documentary. It happens to be a documentary. Now, the one thing which we need to sort of focus on is the documentary film. I mean, there are people who are not even very fond of this term, documentary film. I mean, there are some who prefer non-fiction. There are many other terms. And is the claim of the documentary film to be more objective, to be dealing with facts rather than fiction, is really, it's not really contestable. It is actually, because that is what a whole lot of studies prove there. The documentaries are not as objective as one could be. In fact, even if we go back to the probably, arguably, the first shots in cinema, there's the Lumiere brothers, the workers leaving the factory, even that was staged. Even that was staged in the sense that the workers were told to, assemble behind the gates so that when the gates opened, they would, be a very large number of them walking out at the same time. They were given strict instructions not to look at the camera. So even our first slice of life in cinema was actually manipulated is too strong a word, but shaped. It was shaped, and that is what it is with most documentaries. In fact, there are some recent documentaries which have tried to um, bridge this gap between fact and fiction in the world of a documentary film. No, even there are a whole lot of devices. There are a whole lot of things at the disposal of the filmmaker, like shot size, camera angle, in which a certain direction can be given to whatever reality that is being projected. Whose point of view, it is, as to what is the director actually trying to say. How does he want you to look at the situation? So these are the things which are in the world of cinema. They are easily, let us say, workable. You can do things with that. Having said that, there are certain documentaries which are very consciously trying to avoid any kind of, let us say, artifice in the telling of their stories. And one thing, of course, would be to just let the camera be there and you don't do anything. You just record whatever is happening in front of the camera, but it rarely happens like that. But then, even within that, how much you do with the camera, what shot sizes that you choose upon, how long is the take that you decide on, what camera angles that you decide upon, they are markers of your, um, let us say, attitude, your thinking about what you're talking about. This film, it has a very simple story. It is a remarkable story. A European woman, a young French woman, Marianne Shaw, as her name happens to be, comes to India, goes to Ladakh, falls in love with the place, and then 7 years of her life, half the time is spent in these Zanskar region. She learns to speak the language, tries to make mm, I mean, she's an ethnologist. Hmm. So whether this is an ethnographic study, whether there is a certain amount of manipulation or exploitation of the people involved, that is something that we need to talk about. But there's a very famous documentary of recent times, which is called Far from Poland, written by, made by someone called Jill Godmiller. This was 1985 or something. This, along with another documentary called Winstanley, they're supposed to be landmarks, in the history of documentary filmmaking, because they uh, try to, without any adjustments, without any manipulations, um, they try to tell the story of what really happened and how it happened. So one is about 18th century England. The other, the Jill Godmiller's film is about the solidarity movement in Poland. Um, the film came out in 1985, and there's an interview in which she talks with a film historian about um, what she actually does in order to sort of safeguard herself from the accusation that she has been manipulative, like most other documentary filmmakers. Of course, she had a special circumstance which was going in her favor. She was not allowed to go back to Poland. I mean, she shot a bit of the film, did a few interviews, then she came back to the US to organize funds, and then she was not allowed to. She was she was not allowed to. So she decided to use found footage material which came out of Poland. The Solidarity issued footages, and then she interviewed people. She dramatized certain things, and then she came up with something wherein her personal stamp is not visible at all. And but still, she asks a question again and again in the making of this film, during the making of this film, am I exploiting the Poles for the sake of my career? And we would be tempted to ask this question, is the young filmmaker here, I mean, she was only 29 when this film was made, is she also asking her sometimes, am I guilty of exploiting these people for the sake of my career? Because at the end of it, an ethnographic record will appear. She will make a name for herself as a filmmaker. All these considerations are there. And maybe one of the very legitimate aspirations of a documentary filmmaker is to make the subject more interesting than they actually are. I don't think it is possible here because the landscape is so amazing. The people are so wonderfully simple, but yet we know that there are fights. There is obviously hunger. There is patriarchy working there full time. So all these problems are there. But in spite of all this, and sometimes because of all this, there is a wonderful, ideal kind of an existence which is happening there. And that is the feeling which one gets with this vast open landscapes. And then one of the characters says somewhere that this is the most sunny place in the Zanskar region, and that is very much visible, that it is sunny. It could be bleak. It could be bleak at other times of the year, but all along this film we find the it is sunny, and the play of light and shadow upon the mountains, upon the meadows. It is wonderful. And at the end of it, we realize that she has invested herself very, very much into the making of this film, right? And that love which she has poured into the making of this film in trying to understand these people has been reciprocated to a large extent. We'll talk about other technical things later on, but I think we should approach these films with what I've tried to say in our minds. Okay, so I invite somebody else to take over from here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Jayanto, for opening up this film for discussion. Yes. Would anyone like to begin? Yes, Kalpalata.
Yeah, I really loved this documentary, and when I realized that there is a French woman involved, I was more involved in the documentary because I'm in French. So, and as far as the uh, sir just mentioned the exploitation aspect of the filmmaker, but I would not really. Uh, I don't look the documentary through that lens, because if not her, if she had not presented this story to us, maybe I would not have known this story. She has opened this story to the large audience, and now they know this part of the world, and they would be able to understand this part of the world. And I also did not understand why how she manipulated, because as far as all the conversation which is going on, it is and she has devoted a lot of time in learning that language. And she is trying to be uh, uh, as the same person as them. She is dressing like them also, so she's not acting as other, she is part of them. So I am neither seeing any exploitation there, neither I am seeing any manipulation there. It is a really beautiful documentary, and which has really opened me and through this I have seen another world, and which is in India. And it is very surprising that I never knew that. And there is a foreigner who is coming to India and presenting this story to even to Indians. Okay, so yeah, thank you. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Kalpalata. Jayanto,
Okay,
would you like to
I just sort of say that not my intention to say that there is exploitation here, right? There isn't. But then a documentary filmmaker has to always keep herself open to such a charge it occurs, because after all, there are certain comparisons made between how somebody chooses um, a husband in France uh, to the way marriages are decided in the Zanskar region. Also, the whole fact of um, the boys they go to study, and the girls they do work at home, and they are the ones who finally. So it is finally her attitude towards the whole thing is definitely feminist, because she calls it it's a land of women. That itself is the marker. That's a very important aspect. So, but the fact is that she is telling us a story. There are certain places where there are close-ups. There are certain places which are sometimes purely cinematic. There is no other intention behind that. Extreme long shots wherein the human figure is absolutely negligible vis-a-vis the vastness of nature all around that person. But sometimes it is also to show that how small are human beings in comparison, our human dreams and aspirations and desires. You know, um, so there is a bit of artifice even in something as simple as this. It need not be. And I'm quite sure that in this case it is not exploitative, but the fact is that it is not totally objective also. There is a whole lot of, we are meant to form a positive opinion about this place, these people, their customs, in spite there are a whole lot of things that probably need improvement in their lives. But the fact that they have learned to live with it, learn to deal with it, is something from which all of us can take a lesson. Huh? Anybody else, I think?
There is that scene in the film, which is a very nice um, scene in which that little child Sepal is struggling to put the sack of potatoes on her back and stand up and then move with it. And after watching the film, I was just going through the comments, on YouTube for this film, and a couple of people have shown, a lot of anger about the filmmaker. Instead of helping that little child, is continuing to film the entire scene of the struggle. So I mean, I like you were talking about how sometimes, I mean, every documentary filmmaker to some extent does exploit a scene, I mean, a character or a scene for cinematic reasons. So this may not exactly be exploitation I mean, as such, that may be too strong a word. But at the same time, I think she refused. I mean, she refrained from helping the child because it comes across as a very sweet exchange. They're both of them are laughing about it, and I think she also wants to convey that this is their life. They even as children they have to struggle to carry those weights on their backs, and that's how they learn to adapt to their environment, and this is the only way that they would survive in that rough terrain. And also, I think her position is that the classic position of participant observer in the discipline of anthropology. Also, an anthropologist who wants to study a particular culture would normally do exactly what she did, live in their midst and dress like them and learn the language. And of course, there are distinguished precedents to that tradition. We have various Elvin who did that in the Northeast. So, so these are some of the things that I thought of while watching the film, among other things as well. But maybe I should let some others speak up.
Can I come in,
Yeah,
Geeta?
please, please, please.
Thank you for coming to my rescue here, in the sense that when you talk about how the filmmaker was actually charged with being exploitative, in the in the YouTube comment and all that. But what I feel, that is precisely what I mean, that these charges are not exactly well founded. What I really feel about this moment was that she wanted to show that little girl in a heroic mode, that whole effort of her struggling. And the fact is that the girl is giggling all the time, she finds it funny. And that is why she does not intervene. And they are here in a situation of total equality, because when this girl, she actually reaches the door, she just tells her elder sister very casually, they come and open the door. Huh? What are you doing there? So there is that sense of equality there. They have already established a relationship between the two of them as being sisters, and this little sister of hers, she is trying to show that girl in a very heroic way. I think that's one of the most wonderful scenes in the film. That's what I wanted to say. Even everywhere, the fact that the husband, who, because of a strange custom, has abducted his bride to be, he is totally in love with her. He doesn't mind doing any chores around the house. In fact, he does. And he is absolutely happy and content in this situation. Although there is an inherent patriarchy in the whole thing, but we find that the whole exploiter exploited equation doesn't work actually. So I found that there is something very positive, there's something very gentle, there is something very epic, in the sense that these people live, love, and struggle, and accept. And the whole belief in destiny, that it depends on my karma whether I'll be reincarnated as another human being or not, and all that. And this is something which does not come out of any presumed or intellectualized philosophy, but this is a belief which all of them have, which comes from this kind of a life.
Would anyone like to come in at this point? Yeah.
Yeah, I like the film very much, and I found the life also very interesting, etc. But I still think that all of us are equally guilty of the anthropological gaze, right? And that's from the romantics onwards, right? So we have this whole thing of, well, these people are there, and we like the film, we like the kind of way of life, and all those kind of things. And every time we have these kind of documentaries, this question still comes up, right? I remember Jai Shankar and Anjali Montero showed us the film in the FTI some many years ago, right? Which was about Kutch, and it was very well done, etc. But then still, and of course, those women were very conscious that they were being watched. And they also made statements that what will these people do with our film, right? So I thought that was very interesting. But at the same time, we're still within this framework of the anthropological gaze, and the idea of progress, development, and those things are actually talked about in this movie, that the planes fly by, the trucks are coming in, the tourists are coming in, right? So that means this idea of progress, development, all those extreme Eurocentric kind of things which have already happened to the rest of the world is going to eventually take over, right? But we enjoy this over here, and we feel a kind of a romantic longing that this is past, right? And it will also pass for these people, and they will somehow have to get integrated. But we like the kind of life which is so different from the kind of life we as city dwellers, and even as some more advanced kind of villages have, right? Yeah, I don't know if I made my point, right? But there's this kind of a mixed feeling, right? One of liking it and also having a critical position on, well, is it right or is it wrong, and what are we doing, right? So yeah, that's a little bit of discomfort over there.
Would you like to respond, Jayanto? I think you have to unmute yourself. You have muted your microphone, Jayanto. Yes.
Now it's okay?
Yeah.
And You see, I agree with Rajan, and that's precisely what I was trying to say, that there would be, although the primary claim of the documentary film vis-a-vis the fiction film is that it is objective, it does not allow one's own personal bias to interfere with whatever you're recording or you're showing, but that is easier said than done. It doesn't happen. That is why in the very beginning I sort of apprised everyone of the doubt which other filmmakers, particularly like um, Jill Godmello, have been sort of assailed with. Am I exploiting the people? Although my intention is to talk positively about the workers' rights in Poland in the beginning days of solidarity. It is there. It is very much there, because here, when you sort of idealize a certain subject, you tend to gloss over its problems, and this is to some extent happening here. But then it is done so beautifully, and the personal love of unfortunately, documentaries by and large are said ideally they should not be associated with emotions, because if they do, then they fail as documentaries, which I think is a bit of a nonsense because it doesn't happen. You will make a film about a subject which moves you, whether you like or you dislike. You may try to maintain an objective, ironic distance from that subject while you're making it, but as a filmmaker, there are certain things that you do in order to show the reality in the manner that you're doing, which will show your bias in some form or the other. And that is here in this film also. And if we sort of take into account this whole context of women film writers, I think, although I may be a little too simplistic here, that the woman's point of view, I mean, she is very, very obviously influenced by another woman documentary filmmaker called Trinh Thi Minh. She's a Vietnamese, and then she has um, made a film on the women of Senegal. And coming from Vietnam, she sort of empathizes with them from having come from a francophone culture, both being victims of colonialism. But the fact is that the women will remain exploited even in the quote unquote free state, post colonial state. It is here also to some extent, but then because of the way that the filmmaker is trying to idealize the whole situation, it comes out as less um, traumatic for the women as compared to what may happen, what could have happened. Okay, but Rajan, I agree with you completely. This anthropological gaze is something which you cannot get rid of if you are making a film which you are studying, subject which you are studying as an anthropologist, as an ethnologist. It is just not possible.
Yeah, Nikhila, please go ahead.
Uh, yeah, my discomfort is not with regard to the film, not being objective or any such thing. Um, for instance, when the camera is on, certainly there is a distinct reticence in the filmmaker to disclose too many aspects of herself, whereas it seems as if the life of these people are there filming for bringing on film. The ethnographic gaze is again not so much in terms of it being, whether it's staged or whether she is in some ways true to her subjects, but where she's coming from in terms of her location and how she's showcasing this kind of a lifestyle. Like Geeta, for instance, I too looked at the comments out of curiosity. There are over 16 lakh views to this video and over 1,800 comments on this. Many of the people who were responding were looking at this as a kind of lifestyle which is not available to them. That there is so much hardship, but there is also so much innocence. So it is almost as if one is being nostalgic towards a lifestyle which is laid back, which may be hard, but which has its own joys. So how she's showcasing this kind of a life, and for whom, I thought was an interesting question. So I was reminded of Kieslowski's, camera buff, where towards the end of the film, he realizes that, there are no available subjects which the camera can unproblematically capture. So he's forced to turn the camera onto himself. Then what happens? So if there are available subjects whom you can showcase, capture, tell your story about, present in a particular fashion, we have a film like this. But once you realize that these are not people just out there available to your or others' gaze, then you will be forced to implicate yourself. So in her reticence, in her not saying too much about herself, not willing to lay bare her life vis-a-vis theirs. I thought that's where there was this unequal relationship at work. It's a very interesting film, certainly. Beautiful visuals, and as Kalpalata said, a life that we are unaware of. But does it kind of open these subjects out to people's gaze, framing them in particular kinds of ways? This was my concern. Yeah, thank you.
Also, I think there is a strong subtext of violence, in these pristine surroundings, which to my mind she underplays, except for when in the dialogue there is that woman who says that her 13-year-old son commits suicide. There is no attempt on the filmmaker's part to, find out why and how could something like that happen, what was the reason for it. And also about quarrels, those children talk about quarrels, how there are fights over the harvest. And so these, I think, to some extent are underplayed, because somewhere perhaps she wants to convey, the impression that this is an idyllic life, and everything is so beautiful here, and in spite of the rough terrain and the hard living conditions, they are ultimately happy people. So I think there was some discomfort that I felt with regard to this. Would anyone else like to comment? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Yeah.
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. I thought that suicide business was actually taking us to the fact that, though most suicides don't give us any clue, right? And these people, or many people would say, well, it's gone, it's hope. That's how they look at it, and that's how it seemed to be with all the philosophy that they have shown in the rest of the movie. But the fact that there is a suicide in this kind of a place is actually a problematic issue, right? That means there are a lot of complications, and I think that the whole idea of suicide in a place where everything seems to be okay is not the idyllic moment anymore, right? So that is interesting. It's very sad, and it's also interesting. And the way they take on the suicide, and of course it's long ago, so they probably got through it. But the fact that the suicide happened, that itself is something that's defies explanation, I think. But maybe that's true about every suicide. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'll sort of come in here a little.
Yes, please.
I think Rajan is very right, that the fact that suicide happening in absolutely idyllic circumstances like this, it does show that everything is not all right. But I think that there's a desire on the part of the filmmaker to once again to sort of prolong the ideal nature of a subject as she wants to protect it, that boy went to study outside. It has created pressures within him which he could not cope. And this little girl says, for the first time, we realize that we know Ladakh is a part of India, but visually looking at these people, at no point of time, it appears that this is a part of India that we are familiar with. This is a life that we are familiar with, till she sort of blurts out that I'll die by the time I reach Delhi in an airplane. So Delhi is very much on the fringes of a consciousness, but then it is not her world. That is what she is trying to suggest here, that this boy who probably went to a city to study or to a bigger town, and he could not cope with the pressures, or the kind of dichotomy between the life here as well as expectations from the life beyond. So I think that is what she's trying to do here, and just suggestions that the outside world is probably not so beautiful. That itself is an over romanticized view of the subject that she's taking here.
Okay, thank you, Jayanto. Would anyone else like to come in at this point? Yeah, Tarkeshwar, yes.
Yeah, I think we had a good discussion in the beginning about the relationship between the subject and the object. No doubt that it is a ethnographic film which has come out of our study in that region, or rather, maybe it was a source material for her, and later she edited some of the material that she collected during our field work as 3 films. So, but the relationship between the ethnographer and the our object of inquiry is quite interesting as it comes out in this film. I wouldn't look at it as exploitative. Of course, at a larger politics of the discipline of anthropology itself exists there. Anthropology itself is a product of colonialism, and the methodologies that they adopted too were part of the colonial apparatus. So there's no doubt about that. But we also know that since 1980s, the ethnographers are aware of the politics of colonialism within their own discipline and the methodologies. They're trying to address it. So to that extent, even this ethnographer might have tried to address some of those issues that we don't know, because unless we get into our dissertation and look at it, how she addresses this, the ethnographer's relationship with the people whom she is studying, that apart. But what comes out in this film is quite interesting. I wouldn't call it as exploitative. Yes, she is a participant observer. That comes out in the discussions. But when she is holding the camera, she is not a participant observer. She is documenting it. So she is a non-participant observer. But interestingly, this non-participant observer is drawn into the conversation time and again by the so-called objects. So the objects become subject. They start asking her about her and why she is filming it, what is this, uh, and to the extent that they stop treating her as an ethnographer who's documenting or who is filming it. They ask her to come and join the work. So that girl is also doing that when she asks her to open the uh, door for her, and also when the other woman ask her to lay the plastic tarpaulin sheet and help her in all those things. So in that sense, the object, the characters start dictating or directing terms to the uh, cameraman, camerawoman, come director, or the ethnographer, whatever you would like to call her as. So in that sense, there is a dialectic that is at play there. So that is quite interesting in terms of methodology for me. So she is documenting, she doesn't want to leave the camera and go and help her, but the object of her documentation, she herself draws her to help. So, and she has to leave the camera in a standing position and then she goes and does that work. So in that sense, there is a dialectic that is there. So it is not simply that relationship between the subject and object, where the object also becomes subjects and start dictating terms to the ethnographer come, the camera woman come, the director, is quite interesting, I thought. So I'm curious to know how she addresses some of these issues in her dissertation. And then the question of coming back to the content, apart from this dialectic that is at play between the ethnographer and the culture that quote unquote she's studying or documenting. I don't think when I watched the film, I couldn't hear the um, voiceover many times, but I could understand the dialogues because there was a subtitle. Uh, Nowhere in the dialogue or in the narrative, it comes out that it is idyllic situation. So the focus all through the film seems to be on the work that they are doing, how hard it is, what kind of hardship that they are undergoing. So I don't think no, anywhere in the film it comes as an idyllic life uh, and romanticization of it. Maybe it comes out as idyllic to us. It's where the gaze of the viewers now. It's not the gaze of the ethnographer or the camera. Uh, it is the gaze of the audience or the viewers that is playing a role. Somewhere we as because of our own class uh, context, we start seeing that as an idyllic because we always associate Himalaya and going there and doing certain things as with a certain kind of romantic notion. So I don't know whether it exists in the film or we are bringing that into the film to call it as idyllic and then try to pick up some problem with that it is not idyllic. So in order to say that it is not idyllic, we are again going back to the narrative and picking up the details that are there. So I don't think the film per se is portraying that life as idyllic. It is trying to be neutral, but we know that it is not neutral because there is a dialectic that is happening there. It is not only telling us about the life of those people, it is also unwittingly telling us about the life of the ethnographer. And the interaction between these two lifestyles is quite interesting to watch for me. I think that is the highlight of the uh, film as far as I am concerned. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to comment?
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
Uh, when I was watching it, I thought of Kamla Markandeya's Nectar in the Sea, and I was wondering whether we let them be in the condition in which they are, or the outside agency interferes and then brings about some change. And um, when I go to my native place, the nearest town is around 6 to 7 kilometers. So we have to take either a bus from there, or we have to take an auto, which is almost always crowded because a number of people travel in that way. So one day when I was going home very late, and I had been going home after almost 1.5 years. So that time, a fisherwoman sat next to me, and she had a basket of fish, and then the typical smell of the fish was there around, and then she got to talking. So she told the story of her son not taking care of her, and then the daughter-in-law not looking after her and all that. So I thought maybe if she goes away and she is no longer selling fish, the entire culture will be lost. And then I I wondered if we could just somehow freeze the cultures in different parts of the world we see to be quite interesting from the point of view of an author or a filmmaker, and maybe even a painter. And then we keep the phases of development in which we all are the same way. So this question of um, romanticization and also the colonialism, I really appreciated that, because maybe the Europeans must have felt the same way looking at us when they came to India, and they felt maybe we were really in a different kind of setup, and they needed to educate us. So I really like that idea that Tarkeshwar pointed out. And if he could a little bit, or Jayanji, if you could maybe throw a little more light from your perspective on that.
Yeah, anyone else? Jayanto, would you like to respond?
Uh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's right. But the fact is, the fact remains, no matter how unintrusive your intention as a filmmaker, I mean, the very fact that you're working on film, and the fact that even ethnography, anthropology, these are all colonial disciplines, the fact of um, to some extent, however faint it may be, of exploitation, of trying to learn. I mean, let us come to, I mean, even Edward said the whole Orientalist thing, about why do we try to understand another culture? Um, it's basically to rule, to control that.
Yeah.
So, however much you may want to romanticize it, however much you may want to um, sort of free this current filmmaker from those charges because she's made a beautiful film, which
Mm.
which may seem idyllic to you, but those charges are there even if she doesn't understand them herself, even if that was not her intention. But the fact is that the very situation is such. Her chosen discipline is such, the method that she has utilized in order to record
Okay.
her impressions of the people, it will ensure that at some level it is trying to learn another person, and that person who comes from a culture which is, let us say, not as evolved as your own. that will be there all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jayanto. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a problem with this, where there absolutely being no money, right, in the any transaction in the film, right? And you have a lot of milk. What happens to the milk production? What happens to the sheep and the yak and the barley that they crop, right? Is that just they consuming it, right? And why is this area kept out, right? It's so that becomes a problem for me. Right?
Okay. Anyone else? Sanjay, Sridhar.
I am recollecting A.K. Ramanujan's essay, Annaya's Anthropology. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead, Sridhar.
See, if you can recall that essay, A.K. Ramanujan's essay, Annaya's Anthropology.
It is a short story.
Huh?
It is a short story, not an essay.
We discuss in our classes as a essay.
Okay.
See, nowadays movies also become a essay for us. So we don't discriminate, hierarchize academic and non-academic. Everything we take give equal weight. So, so like that, it's reminding me that only where he tries to show that whatever is happening in the he come across as one thesis and he goes through it and realizes that whatever is mentioned in that is his own story. And finally realizes that that is nothing but his own family's story. His own brother has helped the researcher who has done that research. So because he is away from family, he could not know what happened. So his father passed away in between. He doesn't know all those things. They don't want to disturb his academics. So he realizes everything after reading that dissertation and thinks that this is how anthropology is produced. So there is one irony is that it is not, we have discussed many aspects of it, I think. I don't think any subject is left untouched. When Jain sir has done much of it. So, and Tara was bringing about self-referentiality a question. These are there, but why should we test everything on single documentary? So maybe some things we can leave it. They are not resolved, and it is like now something called there is an anthropological question in the era of cultural pluralism. There is something called they say in a way to produce acceptable ethnography, they ended up in producing elision. Elision is the very discipline, whatever this generalized anthropology or acceptable anthropology or acceptable subject domain knowledge. In that process, what is happening is elision, and it's a longer question. It is also important. See, given that, if you look at leave about this documentary, but see the general anthropological studies and the kind of heroism that anthropologists have got. For example, I have a case where the Chanchus. Chanchus was studied by what is his name? Hammondorf, and he made career out of it. But whatever these anthropologists produced, they tried to produce as if it is a photographic memory or as if it is happening. But the knowledge that they produced actually creating tensions between the various tribal groups. As tribes are romanticized in their accounts, but in reality, they're fighting. If you take Gond's question in Adilabad, Gonds and Lambadas, they fight each other and they don't even allow another deity's image to be kept in along with the Gond's deity. So they are not immune to the system of things that are around us, but these people present as if they are immune to it. So the idea of elision, I think, is important to address in the discipline as such. Whether she is intended or not, the researcher, but this is playing very much. So I don't know how can they resolve it, but they should be open-ended. Their objective, they should reveal their objective, why they are doing. That much I can say. I stop here.
Okay, thank you, Sridhar. Anyone else would like to come in at this point? Any comment, any question, your responses to the film? Yes, Tarkeshwar?
Just to continue from where Sridhar began and ended, about the this Annaya's anthropology. Annaya suddenly discovers that he has been an object of inquiry for somebody else, and the way they have objectified him in their writing startles him to know that it is about him. They have studied him, and this is what they have written about him. So that kind of people who were object of inquiry, discovering what has been written about them in anthropology is the crux of that particular story. Even Talal Asad has written extensively about these issues, and there is a debate between Talal Asad and Ernest Gellner. Ernest Gellner attacks certain anthropologists because during the early 20th century, when they wrote about other cultures, the Europeans, they represented them as savage. If you look at some of the titles of the anthropological books, Primitive Mind, Savage People, Savage Mind, these were the titles. So because they were representing them in a negative way, suddenly there was a shift in the narrative, and they started being generous towards whom they are studying. And Gellner criticizes it as excessive charity. Why are you showing excessive charity? If there is a problem there, you identify it as a problem. Why are you showing excessive charity to portray them in a particular way? And Talal Asad asks questions about, it is not the question of excessive charity or that, but the relationship between the two. And generally in written anthropology, it is not possible for the object to speak because only they get objectified. You can bring in, but you need to represent them. But in the ethnographic film, where they come as characters, they are able to speak if it is not completely scripted. So interestingly, that girl carrying the sack on her back, it looks like scripted because she's holding the camera and she started enacting it, and both know that it is scripted. That's why she is laughing. But she starts asking her to come and help. That is where that is broken. Now she has started speaking. Why are you holding on the camera when I am unable to open the door? At least open the door. So the object is speaking now. So the people who are objectified are able to speak in this ethnographic film. And they are once she leaves the camera and joins that girl, she also becomes the object of the camera gaze. So in that sense, the gaze behind the camera has to move in front of the camera, and she becomes the object of camera gaze. And in that conversation, they start asking questions about her personal life. So in that sense, there is a reversal of gaze. So in that sense, I think this particular film, in spite of the problems, is quite interesting, especially for the ethnographic methodology and the relationship between the object and subject. And of course, because it is a film, it is not a dissertation. So we can't expect everything to be part of this film, because she is bringing out series. Already there are 3. She might come out with some more. So she might be editing and constructing a narration. So there is an editing work at play. So there is a narration at play. So it is not simply a documentary. It is also a narration, and editing is part of that film. So we need to see this as well as a kind of fiction, but a fiction based on our ethnographic work. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarkeshwar. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would like to go back to something that happened in Baroda. When I initially came here, there was an art exhibition, and an artist had put out a lot of his personal stuff. And one of the books over there was Africa, right? And I was looking through it, and it was by Leni Riefenstahl, who is the great documentary producer for Hitler, Triumph of the Will, and all those kind of things. And in this book, you had Leni Riefenstahl with 7 foot, almost 7 foot African men, totally naked, right? Yeah, and in fact, when Horton Spillers had come to the center here, I was curious about it and I asked her that question. And then she's talking about this idea of distance, time, development, which is taking place, right? So I don't think we can get out of these questions at all. Yeah, and as Jayanta said, well, this is inbuilt, right? Yeah, and the question is not about what she thinks and what she says, but the very visual, that's just a photograph, right? The very visual is making a statement, right? And how is it interpreted is a question, but there is a statement over there which is inbuilt. And I don't think we can rub it off or say that it has to be explained. And yeah, that's the response I have. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rajan. Anyone else? No one? Okay, should we wrap it up then? Nikhila, should we wrap up the show?
I think
Can I come in?
Jayant has,
Yes, yeah, okay, sure.
No,
sure,
I just want to thank everyone, and also say that I'm very happy that I could bring this film to you guys. I just love the film, and at least for some of you, this must have been the first time that you saw the film. So I think this is a film which everyone must see and enjoy and not think about it too much.
Jayanta, but I think we should see your film. That's the versus Pune one.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, I think that should come across. And the other one that Kurus made, which is on New Empire,
Okay.
those are two different, documentaries that relate to each other about the Persians, the Iranis, or Persians, whatever.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yes.
Because that also raises some important questions. Like it has played in places where the theme, the subject was migration.
Yeah.
Exile and belonging, A migration, if it is about leaving, it is also about belonging at some point of time or the other. So those are the issues that are addressed there. So we'll do that. But this film, I love for reasons I can't explain, and it was something that, in spite of the fact that she tries to identify with this, she's been given a name by these people. She's called Angmo, and no matter how, let us say, essentially different from these people is the culture that she comes from, that she belongs to. There is something universal about this, that that I think is the point that we should focus on rather than the differences between person and person. I think that is the aim of the film, basically. Thanks.
I think that she herself makes quite clear in the beginning when she says, I'm also from the mountains, and my father is also, a farmer, and we also have livestock. So I think she's trying to draw those parallels between her own life and the lives of the subjects that she's making a film of. Yeah, okay, then thank you very much, Jayanto, for selecting this film and for agreeing to lead this discussion. Thank you all very much for logging in. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night.
Jayant.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very
Good
much.
night.
Jayanto.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.